So this past weekend, we just experienced the fallback portion of the daylight saving time process, going back to what is known as standard time. And every year that we experience these time changes, people seem to spring forward with new reasons why standard time should be the norm, or they fall back on the same old arguments why daylight savings time should stay for good. But why did daylight saving time come about to begin with? What does the data actually say about these time changes, and how does technology impact our sleep habits and our opinions around the daylight savings time switch? Let's get into it. But first, if you don't know me, I'm Spencer, and I like to talk about simple living, frugality, and cutting down on your technology usage, sometimes by the use of other technologies. So last year I made a video talking about daylight saving time, but more so explaining some of the lesser known facts about it, because I had kind of just come to understand daylight saving time myself at that time. Today I want to share with you what the data says about how we are impacted by the time change, how technology and our work schedules can also play a role, and finally whether we should consider making a switch to one or the other, daylight saving or standard time. So quickly, let's start off with some fast facts about daylight saving time. So daylight savings time is actually daylight saving time. It's the singular saving. It can be said both ways, but it is most commonly accepted as daylight saving time. Think about it as you are saving daylight for later in the day. Now, daylight saving time was first introduced in Germany during World War I as a way for them to conserve fuel. By shifting the clock time so the sun stayed later in the day, less lamp oil was required. Now, this was later taken on by North America and elsewhere, though many places have not ever adopted the time change whatsoever, but it was popular in North America and businesses found it to be helpful for them. With the sun staying later into the day, people were more likely to continue recreation later into the day and continue spending. And lastly, the most pervasive myth around daylight saving time was that daylight saving time was done for farmers. This is absolutely not true, and farmers were actually some of the people who most opposed the change to daylight saving time when it was first adopted. Their thinking is that cows don't know what time it is. So when they get milked every single day at, let's say, 5 a.m., just because the clocks have switched that it's 6 a.m., they still want to be milked at 5. So with all that out of the way, it seems pretty clear that daylight saving time is good for business. But what about for people? What does the science actually say? Though you can and people do make arguments for switching permanently to daylight saving time or staying with standard time, what scientists can agree on is that the time change itself is detrimental to human health. While I was researching for this video and just reading up on daylight saving time in general, I found a really interesting article from the Scientific American. I'm going to link it below if you're interested in reading more about this. With that abrupt time change, especially with the spring forward and the losing the hour of switching to daylight saving time earlier in the year, we see many negative health outcomes for people around those times as they adjust. People sleep less and they sleep worse. There is an increased risk of heart attack and stroke and a decreased sense of well-being. And we find ourselves leaning on substances like caffeine that leaves us jittery and anxious. You know, for a while I've been drinking these Magic Mind productivity shots as a way for me to kind of take that energy that I would get from something like a coffee, but not find myself with any of those jitters. Just have that boost in productivity, but without any of the anxiety that comes along with a cup of joe. I took Magic Mind's 7-day challenge. I'm still very much enjoying the product, and if you'd like to try something out like this, I have a unique link in the description that gets a little bit of a discount from my subscribers. Thanks to Magic Mind for the support. I really appreciate it. Now, it might not come as a surprise to you, but most scientists advocate to switching to standard time full-time. If we were to switch to something like daylight saving time full time, I think what we would find is that during the summer we weren't very much impacted, but in the winter though, the sun would be rising so much later in the morning. And in fact, if we were to make the switch to daylight saving time full time here in Canada, in the winter, the majority of the country would find themselves waking up in the dark. Now, I'm sure you can relate to this, but I find that when I wake up in the morning and I have to do something and it's dark outside, it is a lot harder for me to get out of bed. But there's a biological reason for that actually, and that is the hormone cortisol. You see, when we're exposed to sunlight, our body starts naturally producing cortisol and waking us up, giving us that rested feeling and letting us get going with our day. And as the day wears on and it starts to become dark, our cortisol levels diminish and we find ourselves feeling tired and ready for bed. Now, I've talked about this before in my video about sleep habits, and I will link it above wherever it appears on the top of the screen there, and you can check it out if you're interested. But I think it's important that we link ourselves more so up with the rhythms of the sun. I think that's the most natural way to go, and I think we're going to sleep better and feel better as a result. I don't close the blinds when I go to sleep. I let the sun come in and fill the room with light in the morning, and that is my natural sunrise alarm clock. And in the summer, because the days are so long, it's great because I find myself waking up not needing to set an alarm at all for work, and I'm still on time and I am well rested to boot. In the winter, the days are short as it is, and if we move to something like a permanent daylight saving time and we had those later days where the sun doesn't rise until later, we wouldn't see the sun rising until 9 or even 10 in the morning sometimes. And the unfortunate aspect about that is that our work schedules don't change with the sun. We're expected to be there at maybe 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning or 9 in the morning, whatever the sun is doing. So the result is that we don't feel rested. You know, in the article from Scientific American that I was reading, they said that if you end up waking up with an alarm, it's kind of like pulling your clothes out of the dryer or stopping the washing machine before the cycle is finished. You're not going to wake up being fully rested because your body just wasn't finished completing its cycle. Now, talking a little bit about how I particularly feel about this, a little bit of my opinion around this whole matter, I think that we need to move to a permanent standard time. I personally don't think that businesses need the help. I don't think they need the extra light so that we can go to the mall and keep shopping. I think with all of the online shopping experiences that we have nowadays and the fact that everybody is on our screens getting basically subjected to consumerism and materialism at all hours, we don't need that extra hour of sunlight to really boost that all the more. I think what is clear though is a lot of people are impacted by these time changes, particularly the seasonal depression that comes along with the darkness of winter. A lot of people who I see pushing the daylight saving time all year round are people who are trying to escape that feeling. They cite seasonal depression as a reason to stick with daylight saving time so that they can have that sun later into the day. But the fact of the matter is that winter is just short. Winter is going to be short on light regardless of what time the light starts and what time it ends. But the fact is that we all have to be at work in the morning, and waking up with no sun sucks. Now, I honestly think we could all do a lot better at getting ourselves in sync with the sun, more so rising and falling with the natural rhythms of the environment around us, rather than our work constraints and what technology is doing to our brains. And given that I like to talk about technology on this channel, I need to talk about how tech is impacting our sleep as well, and maybe how it's impacting our perception of daylight saving time to begin with. The people that I know in my life who actually want daylight saving time to stay all year round, they're the people who would maybe stay up until midnight playing Xbox or on their computer or scrolling on their phone, and they're not really paying attention to what the sun's doing anyway. They are completely blasting themselves and keeping that cortisol active from the light of their screens. They are also frequently people who stay up a lot later as well. And because they're people who stay up a lot later, they're also later risers. They find themselves waking up for an alarm for work no matter what, and they always are disturbed by that process rather than noticing that the sun is not present anyway. Now, I have a video I want to make in the future about this topic specifically around the whole idea of I'm a night owl, I just love to stay up super late, and how I think that there wasn't the same amount of night owls that there would probably be. I think if you asked people, how many people consider themselves to be a night hawk, a night owl or whatever, they would say, yeah, like probably, I don't know, probably half or probably 40% of people would say that they're night owls. But I bet if you went back to like the early 1900s or the 1800s and you asked people, how many of you stay up super late into the night? How many of you are night owls? I think you're going to find a way lower number because I feel like it is really easy to stay up super late and become extremely disconnected from the rhythms of the sun when we live surrounded by technology and electricity and bright light no matter what hour it is. For myself, I don't allow myself to use any technologies, any screens or anything like that for the first hour of the day and for the last hour of the day. So I'm able to really let myself wake up with the sun, wake up and just not be instantly into the technology. And then at nighttime, I'm not letting that flashing screen, you know, the refresh of the screen, anything like that, impact my body shutting down for the night and starting that process of getting a restful sleep. You know, this whole daylight saving time, standard time switch, which one should we make? It's very complicated because in different parts of the world that also observe this daylight saving time switch, based on time zones, you're going to experience the sun rising at a very different time than I would anyway, depending on even if it's daylight saving time or standard time. It all can completely change depending on where you are. So it's very hard to know exactly who is best suited for what specific time. But to sum this up, I do think it is most important to get yourself closely in sync with the rhythms of the sun. Now, of course, I'm not saying that when the sun sets at like 4 o'clock, you have to go to sleep. You can, of course, use lights and everything to stay awake in those times. But it's important when the sun is starting to set that we're supposed to give ourselves that time to kind of wind down and get that rest. And just hammering this home one more time, I think we need to go to standard time full time. I think when it comes down to having the sun rising earlier or the sun rising later, just because all of our responsibilities start pretty early in this modern world, we want that sun there so we can wake up naturally and we're not feeling completely disjointed and we're not feeling so disconnected from that. It is much easier to get up and get going when the sun is shining, and I think that's just the bottom line. But what do you guys think? Is there a reason why you think we should switch to standard time full time or daylight saving time full time? Or do you think having that switch partway through the year is actually a good thing? Let me know in the comment section either way. I would love to hear from you. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.